welcome to another Dance Mama in Conversation. This time I have an absolute treat of a conversation for you with one of the most well-known fundraisers in the sector, Fern Potter. Fern is going to be talking to us about her experience as a mother in the dance sector and how she's dovetailed her parenting with her, quite frankly, illustrious, magnanimous career. I can't think of enough adjectives to really fully express it. I'm often asked, oh, is a dance mama just somebody performing on stage? Or that's kind of the immediate go-to for lots of people. But actually, Dance Mama as an entity is about celebrating all parents in dance. We also have dance papas as well. And obviously there is gender fluidity as an issue too. But it's about those parents working in dance in any role. And obviously the visible is performers, but we also have choreographers and other physical makers. But there's a huge, intricate machine behind those performances or dance experiences, with a huge diverse range of skills that people have to offer and deliver in order to make that happen. And the financial aspect of it, of course, is quite an important one. Without it, nothing can happen. So really, a dance mama to me is people who are on stage, off stage, and behind a laptop, in a very short and succinct way of saying it. So Fern comes to us with a huge breadth of experience, starting out as a choreographer in New York, which I'm sure she will talk about. She became director of Essex Dance. The list of companies that she's been development director for or head of development includes Ballet Boys, Dance Umbrella, Dance UK before it became One Dance UK, and very recently Birmingham Royal Ballet, also going across the pond to Orlando Ballet too. And she's had a variety of non-executive positions and is currently chair of Canduco. So welcome, Fern.
Thank you so much, Lucy. Thank you. Well, yeah, I mean, what can I say? I have to start by saying that my son, I'm a mama of a son who's 30 years old. So it was interesting going through my head and recollecting what it was like to be a mama back when he was born in 1990, and how we actually have shifted a few things in the world and in our society in terms of support. However, I did come to this country. I was took my dance company over for a festival in the UK. Had an address of a young man who was living here, and met him through friends, and decided after a couple of years of back and forth between New York and England and teaching in Copenhagen and Denmark, that we were going to get married and I was going to stay here and make my life here in the UK. So yeah, I started out teaching and performing and working in dance when I first came here. And when I became pregnant with my son, I was actually teaching at a sixth form college. Had been introducing dance into the curriculum. At that point, we were leading to introducing it as an A-level. It hadn't gotten there yet. The sad part was when I told my employer that I was pregnant, and actually the timing was amazing because he was due the 1st of September. So I would then be off for that period of the following academic year. They said, oh, okay, well, okay, we're not going to replace you at this point. We're just going to let the course drop. And I have to say, after 2 years of building it up, that was a huge blow. Meanwhile, another college, Basildon College, recruited me. They said, we really want to incorporate dance. We know you're pregnant, but you know, when you have your son or baby, can you come and teach? So I said, yeah, okay. So in fact, I was registering the students to come to my class, 9 months pregnant at that point. I remember that. And had arranged for somebody to initially teach that first term in my place. So that really didn't give me much time to recover. Had my son, who was late, he was on the 12th of September, and I was back teaching at the beginning of the following term. I can remember hiding in the broom cupboard to express my milk because I couldn't really do it in the toilets because I had no privacy. And that broom cupboard had a sink very close to where I was sitting. It was pretty grim, but and also I had a cesarean. So the recovery should have been longer and taking time off, but I felt pressured, to be honest, to go back into the classroom and to lead the classes. Having said that, it was very rewarding, and the students loved the class, and I got great feedback. So that experience was the better part of going back early and juggling the childcare. I'm very fortunate. My husband runs his own company that has two things for it. One is huge demand in terms of the responsibilities he has, but also some flexibility when needed. And in the early days of teaching, I very early found a childminder to look after my son Mark, who he went there a couple of mornings a week, and then a nursery in the afternoon. Great nursery, because they were very much into instilling the creative arts.
Brilliant.
Very, very early age, yeah. So Mark had a wonderful experience with the creativity side. And all of that was just juggling along, except when things didn't work the way they should.
Yeah.
And then
that hasn't changed.
That hasn't changed. And then it's kind of like, okay, you know, what can you come home early so I can go and teach? There was one school who asked me to do a term of GCSE teaching. Mark was by this time 8 months old and was still not crawling around that much, certainly not toddling. And I said, and this just shows you how things have changed, I can only do this afternoon slot if I bring him with me because I don't have cover. And they said, okay. So he came and he sat in his little rocking chair, this little chair, bouncer at the corner of the room. The girls loved it, and was as good as gold. But you know, that would never happen now. He would never have. I don't think we'd have permission to bring a child like that into the classroom.
I mean, certainly not in kind of an academic kind of state setting. No, but definitely I think in terms of the other side, in terms of either production or creating works and the informal space, absolutely. But that's incredible, and what a shame actually a little bit.
Well, it was. I mean, they loved it. They
Yeah.
found him quite inspiring. You know, he was in the corner, and when I said go to the corner of the room and with a movement, I mean, they had a good focus.
Yeah. Good audience member.
So yeah, and absolutely, he came with me when I had to do various other things. If I was choreographing or involved, I did work with an adult group to choreograph at that time, and he was with me. He would, if I went to workshops in studios in London, he'd be bouncing on my hip down the stairs, going to the train going on the train with me. Not a great idea actually, because it was 130 steps, but he was good. I was very lucky. He was a good child to sit in those early days. I became founding director of Essex Dance, however, when he was about a year.
Yeah.
And that was the first non-teaching role I had, working in the more as director, you know, with responsibility for an organization. And I remember at the time, it was going to be a part-time role anyway. And I felt I could manage it with the combination of the nursery and the childminder. But very early on, it was the demands of the role required me to up the number of days from 2 to 3 to 4. On the fourth day, you know, 1 day a week was taken over by my in-laws. So I was really lucky on a Friday that I could bring Mark to them and they would look after him all day.
Yeah.
And I could then do everything that mothers have to do that isn't work related, just to get things done, like the shopping and whatnot.
Oh, yeah.
And so I'm sure it's a universal with, if you have a support system around you, you're much luckier. And of course, the rest of my family was living in the US. So to have my family in the UK was really, really important. That was kind of bumping along until, and we've realized it was getting more and more difficult, and we then toyed with the idea of getting an au pair. So we arranged for an au pair to come. She came, and it was beginning of the summer, what would be, well, spring. Within a couple of months, she was getting a little homesick, so her mother came to visit, and her boyfriend came to visit. We were very, very, lenient. And then about a few weeks after that, she'd announced at the beginning of the summer, when it was going to be really difficult to get cover from anyone, she was leaving. So suddenly my husband and I were back to juggling again. And when I said before about him having some flexibility, his work started at 7:30 in the morning. I had already instituted evening classes for Essex Dance, and we agreed that he would work and stop and come home about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and then I went to work, and then I could be there for the evening classes as well. So we were just splitting up the time like that.
Tag team. And I think definitely in terms of the support network, that theme with your family being across the pond, it is no different to today, where people will go to train at a vocational institution not in their hometown, of course, then set up work there, and then that it certainly is my case too, that my parents are sort of 2 hours away, so absolutely having that social capital is so important, and affordable childcare if that's not possible.
Yeah. I honestly, I mean, when I think about, we were in a fortunate position to afford the childcare that we were purchasing, as it were. And then also in terms of having the space in our house, because we did eventually have another au pair who came to us because the family she was with actually was treating her like a pet. So I remember coming home, and there was Martina sitting in the corner, and my husband saying she needs a place to stay, and we agreed, okay, we'll try it out for a month. I can't, poor thing. And she stayed for 3 years, and we're still friends. And it's we are fortunate that we could accommodate that in our home. We had the space, we had the income to spend on that childcare, because remuneration in our sector is terrible, really. And even though I was in a director role for Essex Dance, the actual pay was quite low, relatively speaking to others working as directors in other art forms, especially theater or music.
Absolutely. Yeah. Dance is always unfortunately at the moment it still remains in that capacity compared to as you say, the other art forms where that remuneration is often quite significantly higher, but also by the time you factored in sort of childcare, and even now we considered, when I had a director role or that level role, one would cancel out the other, or in fact the childcare would be cost more than what I could bring in. And that pressure, going back to what you said in terms of returning to work after you had that quite horrendous experience of being told that your job would not be there when you got back and the course would be dropped, absolutely does add the pressure of then trying to keep your foot on the ladder, so to speak, whilst the financial kind of compensation isn't really there, just to kind of stay in the game, as it were.
Yeah, totally. I mean, and just as an aside, years later, when I was in my role as director of Essex Dance, this school decided to bring back or start up the dance program. So I was then invited to come onto the interviewing panel for the new person coming on board, which was great. Actually, I was really pleased that they were turning around and saying this is important, that we now offer that to our students. So it was an honor in a way to now be on the panel to bring in another person to teach, because I'd moved on to more managerial roles.
Yeah.
And it was interesting during that time, so I was, gaining all sorts of senior management experience and working that through. But around the time I decided I wanted to do my master's in arts management, at City University, I also got the diagnosis from my son who with Asperger's syndrome. And so that was quite a pivotal moment for me, because I then thought, so I went ahead and did the master's, and then did various freelance work whilst I was doing it. But coming back, of course, when opportunities were there for me to go full time, I had to reassess, because I felt my son needed me more than I could offer him if I were to go back full time.
Yeah.
So any job I was looking at, and even those that I got shortlisted, even though they were full-time roles, and I then said, look, I would prefer not to do full-time. Being very clear that why, because I just felt he needed my time more at that time. And there were roles that I had to turn away or not approach or not apply for as a result of realizing that I couldn't he needed more of my time. And I think that's a dilemma for every dance mama.
Yeah. Do you feel that the possibility or idea of a job share or anything like that was even entertained at that time, or was just completely either not acknowledged or ruled out as an option?
It's interesting you asked that question. I was able to do job sharing for some of the long-term freelance roles that came up, working with one fantastic festival and saying, look, I'm going to do this with a colleague of mine, and then another one working for London Arts, at the time London Arts, and they were fine about that sharing. It was there seemed to be less flexibility all round in those interviews, and at that time, we're talking now early 2000s even, about when you're talking about the kind of roles I would be going for, the more senior roles. And also and getting somebody who can work with you,
Yeah.
and job share is not that easy. I mean, it was more problematic at that time, I will say that.
Yeah. And feel free not to answer this question, but do you think, was there anything around the experience of the people making those decisions on the panel where they might not have been a parent, or they might not have been a woman? Just whether those might have been factors, because indeed, obviously, we've got things like gender pay gap, etc., which are symptomatic of being in a patriarchal society. And quite a lot of the leaders in dance and the arts are generally guys. I don't know whether that is something that we're chipping away at in the last sort of 5 years with, or a little bit longer, with sort of the new feminist movement and things like Me Too and Time's Up. And
I don't know. I don't know is the short answer, because in some cases the jobs would come up, or I'd see them advertised and people say, perfect for you, and I'd say, no, it isn't, because it's full time and I can't see any wiggle room. Or I'd ring. In fact, I remember a few times actually phoning and saying, look, I'm really interested, but I can only do it if it's this amount of days, even 4 days. And they'd say, well, that's a bit problematic. So whether, and my role working in development and fundraising, whether they felt, oh my God, we can't afford not to have her full time because we need so much, we have such high targets, and she'll never be able to do the work. And I mean, actually, as my husband will say, you pay me 4 days, you get 50. I mean, I get the work done, and whatever the time is, and actually, in some cases, then you moan a bit and say, actually, in 3 days, I'm doing 5 and 6 days worth of work, so I'm saving you a lot of money. I mean, I don't know is the short answer to the underlying answer to that, but I do think that going up forward, I mean, when I moved to Dance Umbrella, Val Bourne, director of Dance Umbrella, got it immediately that I couldn't do full time. And then subsequently Betsy was director. Dance UK, Caroline was the first person who persuaded me to go full time. But she also did it in a way by saying, I get that you might need to take some time. Because also by that time I was lecturing at university, which I still do. And she said, no, I trust that you will do the time as you can fit it in.
Brilliant.
So that was a huge change.
Yeah. And I think that is the important word, is that trust, and the value that that person places in you. I felt the same way about Joss Giles. Shout out to Joss, who's now at Sadler's Wells. But when he was my line manager and director at Rambert, he made me feel that I could be empowered in my flexibility. That was mainly through pregnancy and then just into early days of motherhood. But trusting me to get on with the work that I needed to do in the time available. And I think, as much as obviously I try to amplify all of the issues that we have in the dance sector, we're also the sector most likely, I feel, to be quite inclusive in nature, particularly in the learning realm of things, because we have a sort of utopian view or wish for the world that everybody can access dance, and that is for everybody, and how to think inclusively from the get-go to make opportunities possible. So I think we're also the sector, although we might have the least amount of dosh swishing around, we're also the one with quite a lot of hope and really great examples of practice.
Well, frankly, I've always said, and even from the very first day I started working at Essex Dance, all of our funding at that time, 90% of our funding, 99% of our funding was coming from Arts Council East and Essex County Council. First thing I said to the board was, okay, now we got to fundraise and raise more money. And they said, are you nuts? I said, no, we need to have a number of sources coming in, because when the rug gets pulled, and it will always get pulled, you can't be too reliant on one source. And I think one of the reasons why we are so resourceful in dance and so inclusive is because we've never had that much. So we've had to think quick on our feet, pardon the pun, and you know, look at ways to resolve and solve an issue, a problem of making the work, doing that piece of choreography or production, even though you've got these obstacles in front of you, including lack of funds, and what you can do with what you have. And actually, I think those working in dance are very, very resourceful, and some of the most resourceful people I've met.
Yes, absolutely. I think we are, and we've already touched on a little bit about how your parenting has influenced your work, particularly when you were teaching, and obviously bringing Mark into the room. But also, do you feel, yes, we've talked about time, how parenting's influenced, but in terms of the content of your work, do you feel your parenting has influenced you in any way?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I'm chair of Canduco, and it's interesting, although I'm not personally disabled, I have lived experience with disability. So when I think about, and actually initiated a program for a local charity that I'm on the board of, which came from using the arts for children with autistic spectrum disabilities. And so his being a parent of Mark definitely has impacted and created input into what I think about and how I think about how we can use our art form in a really great way to help children, for instance, with social interaction needs. And that will always be within me. And also it makes me much more, I think being a parent makes me much more, and a former teacher in school. You know, you never stop being a teacher. So you immediately think about programs and ways that you can actually deliver stuff that will make the most impact. And that's the kind of thing that I also talk about when I now train with my fundraising. You know, I am so passionate about people actually answering why we do what we do is so important, rather than just saying what we do. And that comes from seeing how we can make a difference in people's lives. And that comes from being a parent of a child who had special needs. And so that's always been within me.
I think as well, speaking as one of your students, I think really helping people understand their why, and particularly as a parent working in dance, and being reminded of that regularly really helps resilience when times are tough, and times are usually a bit tricky anyway. And then obviously we are now in, I suppose, what's being dubbed COVID times, or the pandemic, where those pressures are unprecedented. We're currently recording in the third UK lockdown, where there are even more pressures are on parents, particularly like today I've been homeschooling and then having a wonderful, inspiring conversation with you, all that juggling. I think people really investigating, writing down, reminding themselves of that why is going to really help give them that resilience to keep going. Because I think for so many people right now, the temptation to just quit because of the financial pressure, just because of the time pressure, and just the general stress is enormous. And I think your experience is so inspirational on how you brought your parenting experience into the dance world, and all of the people it's benefited is a huge demonstration of that tenacity and resilience, and the power that has when it's unleashed and reflected back and given to the rest of society. And I know that people listening to this conversation who perhaps work in fundraising or not in dance will be really enlightened, inspired by hearing this. Just to go back quickly to, in terms of rehabilitation, because that's an area that I feel really passionate about. I still think there's a lot of work to do on that, although we're making some headway. I'm part of a new charity called the Active Pregnancy Foundation, which is mainly more about the general population of mothers and being active pre and postnatally. But were there any resources available to you when you were recovering from your C-section? Or what sort of things did you think about in the little window of time that you had available?
I don't remember anything being available. In fact, I can remember trying after, I'm trying to think about it, 7 weeks after I had Mark, 6 weeks, trying to visit my antenatal group for the first time, touch base. And my mother-in-law had bought me this wonderful Silver Cross pram. It was kind of Rolls Royce prams, right?
We love
wonderful, except it was so bloody heavy. And so I got everything ready for the first. And by the way, I remember thinking after I had Mark, I don't know how I'll ever get out of the house before X time, X o'clock, because I have so much to do before I can get out of the house. Yeah. And this meeting was at 10 o'clock in the morning. So finally I managed to get everything ready to leave. Took that, the pram to the doorstep, required me to actually push down to get over this little lip hump of the doorstep. I couldn't do it. I did not have the strength because it was still very tender and painful. Mm-hmm. And I remember retreating back from the door, slinking down on the staircase and crying and saying, I don't know when I'll ever get out of this house. So no, we're talking pre-internet days. We're talking, the only kind of support you would have would be by the phone or, meet groups if there were groups out there. But at that point in time, nobody said to me, if you've had a cesarean, here's a group to talk to, ways to deal with it. No, it was just antenatal groups and postnatal groups, and basically
nothing. And did you know any other mothers working in dance at that time, or because you just relocated?
Not that many at that moment. When I had Mark, no. I mean, afterwards, some of the people I worked with were then starting their own families, but they were. It was interesting. Almost all of them had both sets of parents nearby, or working for employers where they could take more time off, educational institutions particularly. So that were giving them more time off than my college that did. I think that just things moved on from that period in the late 80s, early 90s. We're talking early 90s. Yeah. So,
but it's just, you know, you're incredible.
no, I'm not
You know,
incredible.
keep it
The
going.
word you used, and I think that's a really important word, and I hold that dear to me. And when I'm thinking about some of my own qualities of why I've continued, why I do, why it's been so important, and that is tenacity. I am a tenacious person, and I think that has come from the experiences that I've had to go through. And I would say that that is an experience, and universally, could be universally felt by so many other dance mamas out there. And that actually means that you will come out stronger. I mean, trust me, my child's 30, and you know, you then, it's something you hold on to and build on as you go through the career that you choose to do. And of course, and by the way, what I left out, the transition as well into management from actively dancing was an injury. I ruptured my Achilles tendon just before I got pregnant with Mark. And so as I was recovering from this injury, I was getting bigger and bigger. And so I was never really able to go full force in the recovery of jumping and doing things quite strenuous, because I was far too pregnant by that time.
Yeah.
And so then I was pregnant, and then I had Mark and the cesarean, and that held things up. So that long stretch of being disabled by the, you know, temporarily
Yeah.
disabled by the pregnancy and the recovery meant taking stock on, maybe I should move away from practically doing the dance and look at more management role.
Yeah.
So
Also very disorientating, I think, because dancers, we get to a place where you know your body really well, you know the car really well, you know where all the fixtures and fittings are, and then suddenly after that experience it takes time to reorientate yourself in your body. And you know, because it has, you know, things like rib cages expand, pelvic, you know, alignment changes, all of those things, and particularly carrying on the hip. And that also, for me, I kept carrying my daughter on the right, and I had my MOT at the rebalance clinic, as I like to call it. And Louise, brilliant osteopath who's there, said, yeah, your pelvis is twisted. And I think we have more information now, but I think there's even more that we really want to dig into, and Dance Mama very much as an entity wants to be part of that conversation and discovering those things and getting the information out to people, because it really it gets you here.
yeah, totally.
That
Totally. I mean, you know, there's still someone inside me that would love to, you know, still dances around, and you know, and as you know from taking my class, I do incorporate choreography in my fundraising training.
absolutely do. You absolutely
So,
do. It never leaves us. It never leaves us. And I think I'm just really on a mission to kind of bust that myth for those people out there who still think, oh, as soon as I have kids, that's it, I'm done. No, there's so much more in the dance industry, and you have so much more to give, and there's so many more people who can really benefit from the gift that you have artistically. Do you have kind of a nugget of advice that you would give to anybody who's aspiring to be a parent who happens to work in dance?
just be brave. I mean, I say this to my students as well. If you don't take the risks of just trying what you want to do, you will always wonder whether you've missed out on doing what you want to do. And so way up, figure out how to get some of that support around you, network with people, share. You know, it's much easier now than it was when I was a parent. It's much easier to try and build that network and be honest and say, look, I need help. Don't be afraid to ask for that help as well. And follow what you want to do, because if you don't, you will always feel like you haven't achieved what you want to achieve. You know, the injury shifted me in, you know, mentally and physically, having the injury and then the pregnancy. But I also realized, because I had started to do a bit of that stuff in New York with another dance company, raising money, and realized I could, and my own company, and realized I could do it, that, you know, maybe I should just do that because I'm good at doing it and I can help others. So even if you have to shift gears, it's okay.
Yeah.
You know,
And can I
embrace it.
just add, Fern has raised millions, millions of pounds, mainly in the dance sector, but for other sectors as well, which has obviously benefited more millions and possibly,
Yes.
you never know, people over your career so far, and I'm sure many more to come. Fern,
And I love doing it, and I love doing it.
and we love you doing it. Don't stop doing it. We are so grateful and privileged. It's been such a wonderful conversation to have with you, and so important. I think for people to understand how the kind of evolution of parenthood is happening in dance, across all of the generations that we have, and that's really fueling how we can impact and change things for the better, even better in the future. And I'm just always so grateful for people sharing deeply personal experiences in this way, because they often don't get talked about, and then things don't change. So on behalf of everybody and me, thank you so much, Fern. It's been absolutely brilliant. Thank you.
Well, and thank you, Lucy. Thank you for doing what you're doing. It's so important.
Thanks.
Thank you for being here.